On Christmas Day, I cooked a table full of Khloe's favorite dishes, but she stood me up again. After a moment of silence, I reflexively opened her first love's Facebook page. The caption read, "Shout out to someone special." All I had to say was my shoulder hurt, and she ditched her boyfriend to come right over. Please keep up that rare quality of putting friends before romance. The picture showed Khloe sitting on a couch, massaging his arm. His head was resting on her lap, his face casually brushing against her inner thigh. She didn't pull away. There was even a faint smile on her lips. The image was jarring, but this time, I didn't break down or start a fight. I just calmly liked the post and sent her a message breaking up with her. Khloe, however, didn't believe me at all. He's just throwing a tantrum. I'll give him the silent treatment for a few days. Then, all I'll have to do is snap my fingers, and he'll come running back. But she didn't know that the only reason I was so easy to win over in the past was because I loved her. But from now on, she would never be able to win me over again. My breakup message went out and was met with complete silence. Instead, it was Julian who sent me a video. In a noisy private room at a restaurant, Khloe's friends were laughing. "Ethan's been wrapped around your finger for 7 years, and now he dares to break up with you? He can't be serious, can he?" Khloe, cutting a slice of mango cake, said nonchalantly, "He's just throwing a fit, trying to guilt me into going back to him. I was actually planning to head back after I finished Julian's massage, but the more he acts like this, the less I'm going to indulge him. I'll just let him cool off for a few days." As she spoke, she held a forkful of cake to Julian's lips. "It's the new one from Carlo's bakery. See if you like it." Her friends started teasing them with knowing glances. Ethan was just a stand-in anyway. You might as well just break up with him for good. Now that the real deal is back, have you two thought about getting together? Yeah, Julian, Khloe has only had eyes for you all these years. Khloe didn't say anything, just stared at Julian with an intense gaze. What are you guys talking about? Khloe and I are just good friends, strictly platonic. He feigned surprise and tapped Khloe playfully on the nose. You'd better go make up with your boyfriend, or I'll never be able to clear my name. A shadow passed over Khloe's eyes, and her voice was strained. Don't worry. All I have to do is snap my fingers, and he'll come running back. I watched the video, numb. Even though I had resolved to move on, my heart ached fiercely. After all, she was the girl I had fallen for at first sight when we were young, the person I had loved for 7 whole years. I confessed my feelings to her on Christmas Day of our freshman year of college. I knew she was the campus ice queen, having coldly turned down countless guys. Telling her how I felt was just my way of leaving no regrets. But under the moonlight, she studied my face for a long moment, then suddenly broke into a smile and nodded. All right, boyfriend, let's see what the future holds. I thought I would forever remember the thrill and beauty of that moment. Until one day, in the heat of a passionate kiss, she murmured, "Julian." I froze completely. That was the first time we gave each other the silent treatment. 3 days later, she showed up with a cupcake to make up with me. "He's just a guy I had a crush on a long time ago," she said. That's it. Seeing the dark circles under her eyes, I softened, and we made up. Back then, I was confident that Julian wouldn't come between us. He was just her unattainable first love from her teenage years, a past that had never even started. I was her boyfriend, her present, and her future. I loved her with everything I had for 4 years of college. After graduation, I followed her to this unfamiliar city, Columbus, even cutting ties with my family to do so. And she was good to me, too. She'd be the first in line to buy me the new dessert from the trendy Carlo's bakery whenever they released one. She would gently dry my hair, iron my clothes, and her anniversary gifts were always things I loved. There were no flowery words, but our life was filled with a quiet, comfortable warmth. I once believed we would go from college sweethearts to husband and wife, spending the rest of our lives together. Until 6 months ago, when Julian moved back to the States. The truth began to cruelly unravel me when he casually remarked, "So you really did find a boyfriend who looks just like me." It turned out she had only said yes to me to compensate for the regret of never being with Julian. The cake she bought without fail was from his favorite bakery. All those thoughtful things she did for me were just things he had once said he'd want in a future girlfriend. She was just using me as a substitute to ease her loneliness, practicing on me to become the perfect girlfriend for him. I remembered something she said when we were deeply in love. "Ethan, let's get married on our 7th anniversary. You left your home for me, so I'll spend every Christmas with you from now on." This Christmas marked exactly 7 years since we got together. But clearly, she had forgotten. It's better this way, because I was going home for an arranged marriage. The clock ticked past midnight, and Khloe still wasn't home. In the past, I would have been tormented, unable to sleep a wink. But tonight, I slept surprisingly well. I guess letting go of someone who isn't worth it is a way of setting yourself free. Early the next morning, I was woken by sounds from the kitchen. Khloe was there, wearing an apron, her slender, pale arms expertly handling a spatula as she reheated all of last night's leftovers. "I'm making up for Christmas with you today." She tasted a piece of the sweet and sour pork right off the spatula. "Not bad," she commented. I looked at her, surprised. Khloe was always particular about her food. She never ate leftovers. She looked up, waiting for my reaction. I realized then that this exception to her rule was her attempt at making peace. She was waiting for me to accept her olive branch and give in. It would have worked in the past, but now I just shook my head. There's no need. No need to make up for Christmas, and certainly no need to win me over. Khloe's brow furrowed. She turned, took out a slice of cake, and casually pushed it toward me. "Your favorite, from Carlos. It's the new one." I looked at the half-eaten cake in front of me, covered in mango, and felt a sharp sting in my heart. The truth is, I don't even like sweets that much. It was the thought behind it that I cherished. But after 7 years, she knew every single one of Julian's preferences by heart, yet she couldn't even remember that I'm allergic to mangoes. I fell silent, the realization dawning on me just how little these 7 years had been worth. Her eyes filled with growing impatience, and she struggled to contain her temper. "All right, that's enough. I've given you plenty of chances to back down. This is the last one. If Julian hadn't convinced me, I wouldn't have come back to make up with you this soon. Don't you dare mention breaking up again, understand?" So that was it. Even her attempt to make up with me was for Julian's sake. "Khloe, I'm serious." I began slowly. "I really am breaking up with you. I'm going home to get married." But the rest of my sentence was cut off by the special ringtone she had set for him. "Julian." Her voice instantly softened, her eyes lighting up. "Okay, I'm on my way." After she hung up, her expression reverted to its usual cool indifference. "Something's come up with Julian. I have to go." Just like always, she turned and left without waiting for my reply. But this time, I didn't watch her go. With nothing to do over the holiday break, I decided to go into the office. I could leave as soon as I resigned after the holidays. Getting my files in order now would make the handover smoother. I stayed until evening, then left the office and went straight to a popular restaurant nearby. Besides its great reputation for food, it was said that couples who took a picture together there were destined to last. I had tried to bring Khloe here several times, but she always had an excuse. Now, on the verge of leaving the city, I decided to finally go by myself. I had just walked in the door when I saw them, Khloe and Julian. They were sitting side by side, nestled close together. The table was covered with spicy dishes that he loved, but she couldn't eat. She didn't eat spicy food or seafood. I had always been the one to accommodate her tastes. But it turned out she had someone she was willing to accommodate, too. Neither of them saw me. He smiled as he fed her a piece of spicy chicken he'd just taken a bite of. "It's good, you have half." His fingers grazed the corner of her mouth. Khloe actually started to blush. In all my time with her, she had always been as cool and distant as the moon. It turned out that at 25, she could still blush with the shyness of a first crush. All because she was with the person she truly loved. "Julian, can we take a picture together?" Khloe asked, trying to sound casual. But her eyes betrayed her nervousness and hope. Julian didn't answer. He just smiled and gave her a little nudge. Then his head snapped up, his eyes locking with mine. He had a smirk on his face, like he was watching a show. He was waiting for me to lose my composure, just like I always did. I had certainly had my share of meltdowns over their relationship. On Valentine's Day, he called her away because he didn't feel like finishing a presentation and wanted her to do it for him. When I was in the hospital with pneumonia, he said he was feeling down, so she chose to stay with him instead. Once, she rushed out late at night just because he was slow to text back. They ended up drinking wine and talking all night, just as friends. I had screamed at her, begged her without a shred of dignity, but her only response was always a cold, "Stop making a scene." Khloe had made every excuse in the book to avoid this place with me, all because the person she wanted to take that special photo with was someone else. A realization like that would have shattered the old me. But I understand now. Someone who doesn't care about you won't see your pain. They'll just find you annoying. I just looked at them calmly and said, "Why are you looking at me? Do you need someone to take the picture for you?" Khloe froze, a flicker of embarrassment in her eyes quickly turning to defensive anger. "Ethan, are you following us? What's with the sarcastic attitude? You're the one who threw a fit and broke up with me. I gave you an out, and you didn't take it. I'm just having dinner and taking a picture with an old friend. What's the big deal? Don't you realize this kind of possessive behavior is suffocating? It only pushes me further away." She rarely ever said that much to me at once. It wasn't because she was nervous about my feelings. It was because she had a guilty conscience. It didn't matter anymore. I said calmly, I'm just here for dinner. And besides, we've already broken up. What you two do is none of my business. Julian raised an eyebrow. My reaction clearly not what he'd expected. Ethan, don't say things you don't mean, he said slowly. I mentioned I wasn't feeling well today, and Khloe was just kind enough to keep me company. Don't get the wrong idea. We're just friends. His eyes were filled with a smugness he couldn't hide. I never used to understand it. He didn't want to be with her, so why did he spend so much time stringing her along? But it had nothing to do with me anymore, and I no longer had any interest in figuring it out. I ignored them, found an empty table with my back to theirs, and opened the menu. In the past, walking in on a scene like this would have sent me storming out of the restaurant. But I hadn't done anything wrong. I was just trying to have a meal I'd been wanting to try for ages. I ordered a feast for myself, all my favorite spicy dishes, without having to accommodate anyone else's tastes. The spicy, aromatic dishes arrived one after another. I was glad I hadn't let irrelevant people ruin a good meal. I couldn't see them, but their voices carried. When did you get so cold? I remember you being so good at cheering people up. A light, familiar pat on the back. I didn't have to look to know it was Julian, being affectionate with her. Remember in 8th grade when I bombed that math test? A bouquet of my favorite baby's breath showed up on my desk every day. I found out later it was you, trying to cheer me up. In 9th grade, when I was stressed about finals, you wrote out inspirational quotes for me every day, saying they'd give me strength and help with my essays. In high school, you brought me breakfast every single day, walked me home rain or shine, and even set midnight alarms to buy limited edition collectibles for me. How come you can't show your boyfriend that same patience? Every word dripped with superiority, a series of rhetorical questions designed to make a point. Khloe was silent for a moment before replying, a hint of defiance in her voice. He can't compare to you. I kept eating as if I hadn't heard a thing, though the spice almost made my eyes water. 7 years of my life, all summed up in that one sentence. I had spent countless nights wondering what I was doing wrong, why she didn't love me more. It turns out it was never my fault. She had given all of her heart and passion to someone else long ago, an addiction she still couldn't break. And it was time for me to finally break my addiction to her. Khloe didn't come home after that night. This was her usual tactic after a fight. No explanations, no apologies, just the silent treatment. It was designed to make me second-guess myself until I fell apart. Then, she would offer a half-hearted apology, and I would forgive her. But it only worked because I loved her. Now I no longer cared. I packed my bags. The apartment was filled with matching couples items that I had picked out, but very few things in it were actually mine. I realized I hadn't been myself in a very long time. After the holiday break, I officially resigned from my job. My manager signed off on it without any fuss. Moving back to New York, then? I bet you and Director Miller are getting close to tying the knot. I shook my head. I'm going back alone. He laughed. Don't be modest. My friend is an HR manager at Sterling Corporation. Your Director Miller has already applied for a transfer to the New York headquarters. There's even a spousal accommodation program for jobs, and she's already submitted the paperwork. Who else would that be for but you? Honestly, for a guy from a top university to leave his home and take an admin job at a small company like ours, you've really been slumming it. Good to see it's finally paying off. I was stunned. Khloe had never mentioned any of this to me. We were both in the design field, a profession known for its grueling hours. She said one of us had to be more focused on our home life, so I became that person. While she was making a name for herself in the industry, I was just an admin at a neighboring firm. It allowed me to support her, but it also meant burying my own ambitions. This spouse Khloe was bringing along couldn't be me, but I didn't explain. My manager was right about one thing, though. My bitter days were over, and better things were coming. That evening, my colleagues threw me a farewell party. As the party wound down, I was walking, slightly buzzed, down the hallway when I heard a familiar voice. Through the half-open door of a private room, I saw Khloe. Her face was flushed from drinking, her expression complicated in the dim light. Do I regret not taking Ethan with me? No. I did originally apply for the transfer to headquarters for him. He cut ties with his family for me, and I know how hard that's been on him. I thought I could go back to New York with him. But the moment Julian asked, I couldn't say no. Her friend shook her head. Haven't you considered that Julian hasn't committed to you after all these years? Once you're in New York, what makes you think you'll have a better chance? Khloe bit her lip and gave a self-deprecating smile. You have to give something your all, at least once in your life. This is my last shot. If Julian still doesn't want me, then I'll finally give up and settle down with Ethan. My fists clenched, my nails digging painfully into my palms. When Julian first came back, I honestly thought I couldn't lose. He was just a dream, but I was her reality for years. All that time, All those memories, I thought that was my strength. But it turns out she had never woken up from that dream. And what on earth made her think I would just wait around for her forever? Ethan. Julian was walking over from the direction of the restrooms, his eyes unusually wary. You heard, didn't you? It doesn't matter. The paperwork has already been filed. I'm getting that spot, and that's final. It all clicked into place. The reason Julian was willing to play his hot and cold games with her, to keep her hanging on, was because he saw her as a means to an end. But there was one thing I still didn't get. If you were just using her and never actually liked her, why did you always go out of your way to show me how devoted she was to you? All those provocative Facebook posts and text messages, they were completely unnecessary. He crossed his arms and smirked. Let's just say, even if it's something I don't want, I don't like seeing someone else enjoy it. I suddenly found the whole thing laughable. In a way, wasn't Khloe just like me? All those years of misplaced devotion, only to be treated like an object. As I turned to leave, he blocked my way. And right now, I don't want her leaving feeling guilty about you. Suddenly, Julian clapped his hands together loudly, making a sharp crack, and then let out a cry of pain. Khloe burst out of the room almost instantly and shoved me hard. I think your boyfriend has a problem with the job transfer, Julian said, clutching his face as if he'd been hit. My head slammed against the wall. When I reached up to touch it, my fingers came away bloody. But her eyes were filled with nothing but rage at me. The sound of a sharp slap echoed in the hall. Before she could say a word, I swung my hand and slapped Julian hard across the face. That one wasn't from me, I said. But this one is. She shoved me, her face a mask of disbelief. Ethan, you're acting like a lunatic. You wanted to break up, fine. I agree. So who I take with me is none of your business. I'm not going to comfort you this time. Let's see you not come crying back to me. She shot me a glare, then ushered Julian back into the room and slammed the door in my face. The bang of the door separated our two worlds. I never thought we would end things so ugly. I slowly turned and walked away. The cut on my head throbbed, and a strange ache echoed in my chest. But at least I knew that no matter how painful or humiliating, wounds eventually heal. This too would pass. That night, I got on a plane, leaving the city where I'd spent 3 years and finally heading home. Given Khloe's pride, I figured I would never hear from her again. We would simply fade out of each other's lives. But a week later, to my surprise, she sent me an iMessage. Being stubborn this time, are we? You'd rather hide and sulk than contact me? What are you up to? I was busy all day and didn't see the message until that night. I replied simply, just got engaged. Can you stop messing around? I know how things work in New York. People don't do dowries, let alone formal engagements. Unless it's some kind of arranged marriage between powerful families. Are you part of a powerful family? I know you're just trying to make me jealous, so I'll come running back to you. But you have to make your lies at least a little believable. I stared at the screen, stunned. I never expected Khloe to reply instantly, let alone with a barrage of messages. I was always the one left waiting. I never thought I'd finally get the instant replies I'd always craved, but only after we broke up. But I didn't want them anymore. After all, we were broken up. Khloe wasn't entirely wrong. I had faked being sick a few times after Julian came back. It was because she would drop everything in a panic over the smallest thing concerning Julian. I just wanted her to care about me that much. But all it taught me was that I was just making a fool of myself. It was pathetic. I looked at the screen full of her messages and didn't reply. In the past, she would have gotten angry and blocked me by now. But a few moments later, she called. I looked at the screen light up and didn't hesitate. I declined the call and blocked her number. We were really over. I had initiated it, and she had agreed to it. A good ex is one who disappears from your life. Besides, I was engaged now. I wouldn't let her complicate my life again. She wasn't wrong, though. Formal engagements weren't common in New York. But the Walker and the Sterling families were anything but common. My family, the Walkers, are in real estate. The Sterlings are in manufacturing. And Sterling Corp., the company Khloe was transferring to, was one of their assets. My fiancée, Isabella Sterling, was currently the CEO of Sterling Corporation. Isabella and I had known each other since we were kids, but she was always on another level, the prodigy everyone else's parents compared their children to. She was a year younger than me, but while I was still in elementary school, she was already being accepted into gifted programs at Ivy League universities. By the time I barely scraped through my SATs, she had already worked in every division of her family's empire. Then she took over Sterling Corp., which had been losing money for years. In just 3 years, she turned it into an industry leader. Its branches were all over the country, so our paths rarely crossed. We were all considered the golden children of our generation, but her light shone far brighter than anyone else's. To be honest, when I agreed to the arrangement, I never thought the marriage would actually happen. With her accomplishments, she certainly didn't need to listen to her family. But she agreed, and she planned the entire engagement party around my preferences. I said I wanted to keep it quiet, and she agreed. The venue was elegant but understated, with only our immediate families and closest friends in attendance. In front of our families, she looked at me with a sincere, gentle expression as she slid the ring onto my finger. "Ethan," she said, "my life used to be all about work. But from now on, you are the most important part of it." She treated me with complete sincerity and respect. Amidst a chorus of voices calling us a perfect match, I called her Isabella and returned her smile with a promise of my own. I didn't feel a thrill, but I felt a deep sense of peace. She had a reputation for always keeping her word. Even if we never fell in love, I knew I would never have to worry about her loyalty. I wouldn't have to worry about being someone's second choice again. I had spent 7 years of my life for a relationship that left me covered in scars. A stable marriage like this, beneficial to both our families, was the best possible outcome. Exhausted from the day's engagement events, I collapsed onto my bed. My best friend, Leo, video called me. "Ethan, Khloe was desperately trying to find you tonight. Didn't she agree to the breakup? Don't tell me she's having second thoughts." Leo went to the same college as us. He'd witnessed our entire relationship. He had been as against me following Khloe to Columbus as my parents were. "I get that relationships are about compromise," he'd said. "But why are you always the one compromising? Career-wise, New York has so much more to offer than some small city in Ohio. Why didn't you try to convince her to stay?" Of course, I had tried. But no matter what I said, her answer was always the same. Her family was there, her friends were there. "Finally," she said, "we can just do long distance if you want." I couldn't bear the thought of it. I was afraid of what long distance would do to us. I wanted to see her every day. I confidently told my family we would be fine. The only piece of advice I did take was to never tell her about my family's wealth. I was sure that one day, I would bring her home and prove to everyone that I had made the right choice. Back then, I thought sacrificing everything for love was brave. Now it just seems foolish. I told Leo, "It's really over." I blocked her number. As for her regretting it, I doubted it. It was more likely that she just wasn't used to losing control over me. Good. I heard Khloe is transferring to the Sterling Corp headquarters, and she's bringing a family member with her. What's that about? Anyway, you start at Sterling tomorrow too, right? Isn't that going to be a complete drama fest? I was unconcerned. It'll be fine. She's the director of Design Team B, and I'll be in Team A. I studied design, and Sterling Corp was the perfect fit for my major. So when my family suggested I start there, mentioning it would also be a good way to get to know Isabella better, I agreed. I did, however, turn down the offer of a deputy director position. I wanted to start from the bottom. I'd been working as an admin since graduation. My resume had a lot of gaps. I needed to fill those gaps with my own hard work. The position I earned shouldn't be based on who my family is, but on my own merit, just like Isabella did when she started. Since we were to be partners, I wanted us to be equals. Besides, Sterling Corp is a massive company. Team A and Team B are in different buildings. The chances of running into her were slim. And honestly, so what if I did? She would have Julian with her. I wasn't the one with anything to hide. Even if we crossed paths, I would just walk on by. The next day, I officially started at Sterling Corporation. The pace at a big corporation was fast. Lacking experience, I put in extra hours to catch up. Fortunately, Isabella was a workaholic too, so we mostly kept to ourselves. The only exception was when I worked late, her assistant would deliver dinner from a private chef, and on weekends, we would have dinner with our families together. For two people starting with no romantic feelings, this level of polite distance felt just right. I hardly thought about Khloe at all. I did, however, occasionally wonder about Julian. He had been so determined to get into Sterling Corporation. I wondered why. It was strange. Sterling Corp was competitive, but for someone with a degree from a prestigious overseas university, he shouldn't have failed the interview. He had to rely on Khloe's spousal accommodation to get in. Half a month went by, and I heard no news from Design Team B. My curiosity had its limits, and I was more focused on my own work. I just didn't expect to see Khloe again so soon. That day, our team had a design proposal that needed to be delivered to the marketing department. The marketing department, Design Team B, and the CEO's office were all in the same building. I had plans to meet Isabella after work for dinner at her family's estate, so I offered to drop it off. And just my luck, I ran into Khloe while waiting for the elevator. "Ethan," she called my name through the crowd, her voice tight with anger. I turned around and was taken aback. She had always been undeniably beautiful, always maintaining that cool, elegant image. But right now, she looked exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't slept in days. Before I could react, She had grabbed my arm and pulled me into the stairwell. She backed me into a corner, her eyes fixed on mine. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, nearly touching mine. Her eyes held a mix of suppressed anger and something else I couldn't quite decipher. The proximity made me deeply uncomfortable. I held up the file folder between us, creating some space. Her eyes dropped to the folder, recognizing it as a design proposal. "So, you're working at Sterling Corp now?" For some reason, the tension in her face relaxed, and the corners of her mouth even turned up in a slight smile. Was it fun? Her tone was suddenly much lighter. "What are you talking about?" I asked, confused. "Don't play dumb." She gave me a playful shove. All that talk about breaking up, ignoring my messages, even blocking my number, only to secretly follow me to New York. "Do you have any idea how worried I've been? I found out you quit your job. I looked everywhere for you. When you said you were engaged, I almost believed you." She suddenly laughed. How could I have fallen for that? So ridiculous. I looked at Khloe, at the absolute certainty on her face that I was still hopelessly in love with her. It was laughable. Yes, I had loved her. I really had. But the Ethan whose world revolved around her, she had thrown him away with her own two hands. "Let go of me." I pushed her away, but she just smiled. "Not until you kiss me." My expression turned to ice as I pried her hand off my arm. She winced, clutching her arm and staring at me in disbelief. "Ethan, I'm trying to make up with you here. How long are you going to keep this up?" "Fine. Yes, I gave the job to Julian. I only kept it from you because I knew you'd overreact. I was planning to tell you once everything was settled. This is your hometown anyway. It's not like it was hard for you to come back. And look, you got a job at Sterling on your own. No harm done. Can you please stop being so petty? The pressure at headquarters is immense, and I can't deal with this drama on top of it. It's exhausting." It was rare for her to offer such a lengthy explanation, but I was unmoved. My eyes held only scorn. "What's the matter? Did you finally realize Julian is never going to commit, so you decided to settle for your second choice and marry me?" Her expression faltered. "You heard what I said that night." She opened her mouth as if to explain, but the sound of hurried footsteps approached from behind. It was Julian, his expression a mixture of surprise and accusation. "Ethan, what are you doing here? I thought you two broke up. What is this? Are you trying to get back together?" Khloe's face immediately tensed up. I got it. She still hadn't given up on Julian. Then what gave her the right to come crawling back to me? Leo had been right. The drama had arrived right on schedule. Except this time, it was Khloe's drama, not mine. I didn't say a word. I already knew who Khloe would choose. Countless times in the past, when forced to choose between me and Julian, she always chose him. I didn't know what had happened over the last couple of weeks, but Julian's tone was surprisingly accusatory. As if he wasn't the one who had been enjoying her devotion while refusing to commit. As if he'd been the official boyfriend all along. But I didn't need to explain anything. Khloe would smooth things over with him. But to my surprise, this time, Khloe remained silent. For the first time ever, she didn't immediately rush to his side. Julian was clearly taken aback. The usual smug confidence in his eyes seemed to crack. And here I was, actually considering giving you a chance. Turns out you were never serious. Fine. I hope you two will be very happy together. His face hardened, and he turned and stormed off. His heavy footsteps echoed like a string of accusations. Khloe finally snapped out of it. She hesitated for a moment, then turned to me. "Ethan, I'll explain later." She took a few steps, then turned back again. "Breaking up was just something we said in anger. I never agreed to it. You're still my boyfriend." Before I could respond, she hurried off after Julian. I stood there holding the folder, momentarily speechless. Just as Julian had accused, someone was clearly trying to have it both ways. And that someone was Khloe. She claimed she didn't want to break up with me, yet she was chasing after another man. The hypocrisy was laughable, but it had nothing to do with me anymore. I wasn't going back. It didn't matter if she didn't want to break up. I pushed open the stairwell door and headed to the marketing department. The marketing team had a few questions about our proposal. Seeing I was new, the contact hesitated. "You know what? I'll just follow up with someone else later." "That won't be necessary." I had been involved in the project from the start, so I was able to clearly explain all the points they were unsure about. The marketing director, who was walking by, overheard and stopped. "New guy from Team A? Not bad." My contact looked apologetic. "My bad." I jumped to conclusions. "It's just that the new guy from Team B, Julian, is completely clueless and always causing problems." I guess I assumed all new hires were like that. Someone nearby shook their head. "He only got the job through the spousal accommodation program, but he's supposed to have a master's from a top overseas university. Did he buy that degree or something?" It occurred to me then that Julian could have just applied directly to Sterling Corp. Why go through the trouble of having Khloe get him the job? And the recent subtle shift in his attitude toward Khloe, Could it be because things at work weren't going well for him? In Khloe's eyes, Julian had always been this perfect, godlike figure, brilliant, charming, and flawless. But you learn a person's true capabilities when you work with them day in and day out. I wondered how much of her first love filter was left. It must still be there, otherwise she wouldn't have rushed after him. But in the end, their drama had nothing to do with me. I wasn't interested. I was curious about Julian's secrets, but only to a point. I left the marketing department and headed for the CEO's office to find Isabella. Someone blocked my way. "We need to talk." I just never expected it to be Julian. I looked at Julian without a word. I looked at the man who had caused me so much pain and so many sleepless nights over the past 6 months. In the beginning, I had actually approached him myself. I told him, straight up, that if he loved Khloe, I would step aside. I knew you couldn't force happiness. But Julian had just looked at me with that familiar mix of contempt and pity. It was the way he always looked at me. He saw himself at the top of our little love triangle, and he always acted like it. He had just chuckled as I stood there, heartbroken, offering to let them be together. "No wonder Khloe says being with you is exhausting," he'd said. "She and I are just friends. It's the simplest, most innocent relationship. Why do you have to read so much into it? No matter how much you love someone, you can't lock them away from the world. She has to have friends." The denial was so transparent, his smugness so infuriating. But there was nothing I could do about it. Because I loved Khloe. Since he didn't love her, I thought that if I just loved her enough, she would eventually see that I was the one for her. But that was all in the past. Now, Julian was trying to put on that same superior act. But the exhaustion in his eyes betrayed his insecurity. "I underestimated you," he said. He glared at me. "I thought you were just some simple, naive guy. I didn't realize you were so manipulative, playing the victim to get what you want. Now Khloe's all worried about you. Are you happy now?" I was just annoyed. Were these people incapable of understanding plain English? "I've told you, Khloe and I are broken up." Julian just scoffed. "Save it. You can use that line on Khloe, but I'm not buying it. I know your history. I know how obsessed you are with her. Besides, you were together for 7 years. A whole 7 years. You really think another woman would want you after all that?" I stared at him, speechless. What century was this guy living in? For someone who had studied abroad, his thinking was incredibly archaic. But he thought he'd struck a nerve, and his voice regained its familiar smugness. "Just like you can't get over Khloe, she can't get over me. She's only paying attention to you now because you're playing games. But you saw what happened just now. All I had to do was snap my fingers, and she still chose me." I realized talking to him was pointless. We were speaking different languages. "So what is it you want from me?" "I'm telling you I've changed my mind," he said, tilting his chin up. "Now that we're working at the same company, I've realized just how impressive Khloe has become. So while she's my backup plan, I don't want you bothering her. If I succeed in becoming the CEO's husband, then I don't mind giving her back to you. But if that doesn't work out, then Khloe is a decent consolation prize. In that case, I'll take her. So until I've made my choice, I want you to stay away from her. And stop with the manipulative games, or you'll regret it." "Understood." Julian laid out his grand plan, and my amusement turned to genuine shock. The CEO's husband? So that was why Julian was so desperate to get into Sterling Corporation. He was after Isabella. So, to summarize, he was after my fiancée and was warning me to stay away from my ex. It was utterly absurd. But where on earth did he get this confidence? Do you know Isabella? Or more to the point, does she know you? I was deeply skeptical. Isabella was a notorious workaholic with a non-existent dating history. When she first heard that I, her betrothed, was in love with someone else, her reaction had been mild. She'd said it would let her focus on her work. A woman of her caliber must have had countless men pursuing her. But she was famously immune to romance, never involved in a single scandal. It had gotten to the point where her parents had started to gently question her orientation, to no avail. Her agreeing to our engagement, her consideration for my feelings during the planning, and her polite, measured interactions with me since then had been a source of immense relief for them. Her parents had been so thrilled they nearly wept. They didn't look at me like a future son-in-law. They looked at me like I was some kind of savior. Now, looking at Julian's bizarre confidence, I could have just told him who I was. But I had joined Sterling Corp quietly because I wanted to make it on my own, to prove myself step by step. The moment my identity as Isabella's fiancé was revealed, everything would change. That wasn't what I wanted. So, I said nothing. Julian glanced at me. Of course I've met her. When I was studying abroad, Ms. Sterling was a guest lecturer. She's also an honorary alumna of my university, so you could say I'm her junior. I've seen all her interviews. She once mentioned her type. She likes men with long eyelashes. I worked so hard to get into Sterling Corp just to be closer to her, so she could notice me and fall in love with me. Julian spoke with such passion, and I suddenly realized that everyone looks the same when they're blinded by a crush. So ridiculous, so self-unaware, so foolishly optimistic. I couldn't help but laugh. He shot me a wary look. What are you smiling at? Don't think just because you kind of look like me and have long eyelashes you have a shot with Miss Sterling. A guy who spent 7 years with another woman is used goods. She wouldn't look twice at you. Look alike. When I first met Julian, I didn't think we looked alike. Not until I saw an old photo of him from middle school, with his clear eyes and long lashes. But 7 years had passed. His eyes were no longer innocent. We looked nothing alike anymore. You should look in a mirror sometime. That was all I said before turning to leave. When I got to Isabella's office, she was in the middle of an international conference call. But she paused the meeting, made me a cup of tea herself, and brought out some pastries. They were all my favorites, and they were all fresh. I only stopped by her office occasionally, but she always had them ready for me. It was a thoughtful gesture. I remembered what Julian had said about her liking men with long eyelashes. Could it be that she actually liked me? I immediately dismissed the thought as ridiculous. If she had really liked me, she'd had plenty of opportunities to say something over the years. But she never had. The type she mentioned was probably just an off-the-cuff remark to get people to stop asking. After her meeting ended, we took the private elevator down to the garage. The driver was pulling out smoothly when he suddenly slammed on the brakes. No one could have predicted that Julian would be standing in the CEO's private parking garage. He yelped in pain, but as he looked up, whatever he had planned to say died in his throat. His voice was shrill with shock. "Ethan, what are you doing in Ms. Sterling's car?" Julian glared at me, furious, but I was under no obligation to answer him. And clearly, neither was Isabella. The driver got out of the car. "Are you a Sterling Corp employee? This is the CEO's private garage. How did you get in here?" Julian snapped back to reality, remembering why he was there. He composed himself and spoke apologetically. "Oh, is it? I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I'm a new employee, still getting to know the building. I was just so focused on a design proposal that I must have taken a wrong turn." He fluttered his eyelashes as he spoke. It was so deliberate you could tell he'd practiced it in a mirror. I watched his contrived performance, and I remembered how effortlessly he used to manipulate Khloe's emotions. Back then, he had been so nonchalant, so confident in his control. It turned out that in front of someone he was actually nervous about, his performance was just as clumsy as anyone else's. He looked like a clown, and I realized that my own past meltdowns must have looked just as pathetic to Khloe. It's true what they say about being too close to see things clearly. I glanced at Isabella. Thank God, in our calm, respectful future, I would never again be that pathetic, unaware person. Julian continued his performance, trying to exude what he thought was charm, all while sneaking glances at Isabella to gauge her reaction. But Isabella didn't give him so much as a single glance. The driver, however, sensed her impatience. "Please leave now." Julian's face fell. This cold dismissal was a far cry from the charming meet-cute he had probably envisioned. But he wasn't one to give up easily. He paused, then jogged over to my side of the car and peered at me through the partially open window. "Ethan, I called your name but you didn't answer. I thought I was seeing things, but it really is you. What are you doing in Ms. Sterling's car? Does your girlfriend, Khloe, know about this? After 7 years together, I think she deserves to know what you're up to." His eyes were filled with malice, a look that said he wanted to destroy me. But he masked it with a look of innocent concern, as if he'd just spoken out of turn. Then, his gaze shifted to Isabella. "I'm so sorry, Miss Sterling. I have a bad habit of speaking my mind. I hope I haven't ruined your evening. I really didn't mean to intrude. I'll leave now." He smiled at her, fluttering his eyelashes again, but made no move to leave. Only when the driver prompted him again, and it was clear Isabella was going to continue ignoring him, did he finally walk away, looking dejected. After Julian was gone, Isabella turned to me. "Should I take care of him?" She made a throat-slitting gesture. I sat bolt upright. I was under the impression the Sterling family wasn't involved in organized crime. I had signed up for a stable, arranged marriage, not to be a mob boss's husband. Isabella stared at me for a second, stunned. Then her usually impassive eyes lit up with amusement. "What are you thinking?" she said, giving me a light tap on the arm. "I meant, should I have him fired? I haven't looked into your past, so I don't know the history between you two, but he clearly means you harm. If he's going to upset my fiancé, I won't have him showing his face around you again." I was taken aback. Since our engagement, Isabella and I had had some physical contact. We'd exchanged rings, hugged, and kissed each other on the cheek at the party. We usually walked arm in arm in the garden after our family dinners. But this was the first time she had done something so casually affectionate. It reminded me of how Khloe used to give me little playful taps like that when we first started dating. Back then, her eyes had been so full of affection. And yet, look where we ended up. The love and sweetness I thought I'd never forget had long since faded. I sighed internally. When I looked up, Isabella was still waiting patiently for my answer. Not wanting to reveal my complicated feelings, I forced a smile. Firing an employee just for me? Wouldn't that be a bit of an abuse of power, Miss Sterling? Professionally or personally, he deserves to be fired. Isabella's tone was serious. There are several clearly marked signs leading to the CEO's private garage. If he can't see those, it's a clear sign of incompetence. She glanced at her phone. I had my assistant look him up 3 minutes ago. Julian was hired under the Spousal Accommodation Program as a family member of Khloe Miller, director of Design Team B. We gave him a designer position based on his resume, which listed an overseas master's degree. However, his performance to date suggests he is not qualified for the role. So, from any angle, he is not a good fit. HR will be verifying the authenticity of his credentials. If his resume is found to be fraudulent, it will become a legal matter. She laid it out so logically I couldn't argue. At the same time, I felt a strange pang of disappointment. So it wasn't about me. Isabella was just firing him for professional reasons. I nodded. Okay, then let them follow procedure. As the car drove toward the estate, I expected Isabella to ask about Khloe. Julian had made a point of mentioning our 7 years together. I didn't feel I had done anything wrong in that 7-year relationship, but I knew how it must look to an outsider, especially to someone as brilliant and accomplished as Isabella. Her own dating history was a complete blank slate. I pretended not to care, but I was worried she would mind my past. But she didn't ask a single question on the way there. We just talked about work. Her insights, offered in just a few sentences, actually helped me solve a couple of problems I'd been stuck on. Isabella really was incredible. Looking at her beautiful profile, listening to the calm, gentle tone of her voice. A question kept nagging at me. Did she really not mind? Tonight, we were having dinner at the Sterling family estate. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling greeted me with their usual warmth and gratitude. After dinner, Isabella's assistant arrived with a file. Isabella took it and spoke calmly. Mom, Dad, I'd like to transfer my shares in Sterling Corp to Ethan. Do you have any objections? I stared at her in astonishment. Sterling Corp was at its peak, and her 60% stake gave her controlling interest. At market value, it was worth billions. More than that, Sterling Corp was her masterpiece. It was her baby. She'd even said in an interview that she thought of the company as her child. And now she was just handing it over to me. To my surprise, her parents had no objection. Should I transfer my shares to Ethan as well? Her mother asked. I'll follow my wife's lead, her father added. Isabella signed the contract. Do as you wish, she told them. She handed the contract to me. Ethan, would you like to go for a walk? Even after Christmas, the garden air was crisp with the scent of winter. It carried on the evening breeze. Her voice seemed to ride on that breeze as she spoke. Ethan, I can tell you've been in a funk since that man showed up. Everyone has a past. It's those experiences that make us who we are. Whatever unhappiness you've been through, I just want you to know, it's over. We're going to spend the rest of our lives together. The future is what matters now. I want you to feel secure. From now on, I'll be working hard for you every day. That made me laugh, but my eyes still stung a little. I asked her seriously, so, the fact that I was in a 7-year relationship before this, you really don't mind? Just one? Of course I don't mind, she said, her expression turning serious. Actually, I've had many relationships myself. I blinked. I thought she was completely dedicated to her work, that she'd never dated. Were they all secret relationships? She shook her head with mock seriousness. When I was starting out, I was young and aggressive. I made a lot of enemies in the business world. I bet a lot of them still think about me. She added, in the can't stand the sight of me kind of way. I burst out laughing. So the famously stoic, robotic Isabella Sterling had this playful side to her. And I knew this side of her was something she only showed to me. She was trying to make me happy. Isabella was giving me something special. The moonlight spilled down around us. The weight in my chest lifted, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Isabella looked at me, and a faint blush crept up her ears. Ethan, can I kiss you? We were standing very close. The faint, pleasant scent of her perfume mingled with the sweet smell of the garden flowers. I felt no hesitation. I smiled and closed my eyes. A second later, her lips gently met mine. It was soft, like a feather brushing against my heart. For the first time in a long time, a chord was struck within me. She wrapped her arms around my waist and rested her head on my chest. When you feel you're ready, we can get married, okay? I could hear her heartbeat, strong and a little fast. For some reason, it made me feel completely at peace. Okay, they say a good relationship helps you become a better person. After last night, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted. I felt refreshed. I woke up early as usual and went for a morning run with Leo. We had grown up together, our family homes right next to each other. He had tried so hard to talk me out of leaving New York back then that we'd almost stopped being friends over it. I was so glad I hadn't lost him. Leo kept glancing at me as we ran. "What is it?" I asked, touching my face. I was pretty sure I'd washed it before I left the house. "Ethan, you look great today. It's like you've been reborn." He leaned in conspiratorially. "Did you too, you know?" My face flushed slightly. "We just kissed." "Just a kiss, and you're glowing like this?" Leo covered his mouth in mock surprise. "Isabella really is a genius at everything, isn't she? I can't wait to see what happens when you two really get together." We laughed as we continued our run. But I remembered when I first got back to New York, Leo had rushed over to see me. When he saw me, his eyes had welled up. "Ethan, you've lost so much weight." His hesitation told me that wasn't what he really wanted to say. He probably wanted to say I looked like hell. During that time, I had been lost in a fog of anxiety and self-doubt. I had forgotten how to take care of myself. I was like a withered plant. No wonder they say a good relationship helps you bloom. I was finally happy with where I was. After my run, I showered, ate breakfast, and headed to the office early as usual. As the new guy, I had a lot to learn, so I made it a habit to be the first one in. But today, someone had beaten me to it. "Ethan." Khloe was standing in the doorway, blocking my path, her face flushed with anger. "I told you I would find you, that I would explain everything. How could you do this?" I had a pretty good idea why she was there. I just looked at her calmly. "What did I do?" "Julian was fired last night. He said it was your doing." I had no desire to get into it with her. HR would have given him a clear reason for his termination. "If you have a problem with it, take it up with them, not me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." She didn't move, just stared at me, before finally saying, as if making a great concession, "Stop going after Julian, and I'll marry you. I promise. I'll have you transferred to my team. I'll move Julian to a different department. And after we're married, I'll cut off all contact with him." "Is that what you want to hear?" I finally lost my patience. "Khloe, how can I make you understand? We are broken up. I am not going to marry you. And as for Julian being fired, he brought that on himself." Khloe froze, completely shocked that I would refuse her. "I said I would marry you. Isn't that what you've always wanted?" She looked at me, a flicker of panic in her eyes. She even reached out as if to feel my forehead for a fever. "Are you in shock?" "Ethan," I said, "I'll marry you." I pushed her hand away. "I've already made myself clear. I'm not going to repeat myself. If you don't leave now, I'm calling security." I turned to press the security button, but Julian lunged out from around the corner, blocking my path. In the morning light, I could see his eyes were wide and bloodshot. He clearly hadn't slept. He looked unhinged. "Ethan, you've always been in love with Khloe, right? I'm giving you your chance. I told her to marry you. How long are you going to keep up this act? Just say yes already." There was a desperate, almost paranoid edge to his voice. "You marry her, and you get the company to not fire me. Otherwise, I'll tell everyone your dirty little secret." He lunged forward as if to grab me. "Just say yes to her." I moved to step away, but Khloe stepped in front of me, facing Julian. "What secret?" I couldn't see her face, but her back was rigid, and her voice was tight with tension. Julian didn't answer her. He just kept his eyes locked on me. "This is your last chance. Say yes to her, and stay out of my way." I didn't answer him. I just calmly pressed the security button. "What is the secret?" Khloe demanded, grabbing Julian's wrist. "You're hurting me," he yelped. But Khloe, who once would have been horrified to cause him the slightest discomfort, didn't seem to hear him. She just repeated her question. What did Ethan do? They struggled with each other, a pathetic sight. I just watched unmoved. The last flicker of hope in Julian's eyes died out. He finally believed that I really was done with Khloe. And then, his expression twisted into something even more manic. "Khloe, do you want to know why Ethan doesn't want you anymore?" "Because he's a kept man. He's Isabella Sterling's boy toy." Julian's eyes were wild with a crazed regret. "I never should have told you Miss Sterling likes men with long eyelashes. You must have found out and deliberately went to that garage to seduce her yesterday. If I had just gone a little earlier. I spent days scouting the place, planning the perfect encounter. If I'd just been a little earlier, that would have been me in the car with her. But why isn't she more selective? Why would she settle for trash like you? Why? I told her all about you, and she still fired me for you. I worked so hard to get close to her. Why would she do this to me?" I had never seen Julian so completely unraveled. He was far more pathetic than I had ever been at my lowest. Khloe slowly let go of him. When she turned to me, her eyes were red-rimmed. "Is it true?" she whispered. "I don't believe it." She reached for my hand. "Come with me." I pulled my hand away just as security arrived. Recognizing her, the guards were polite. "Director Miller, Please, let's talk this out calmly. No need for any trouble. Khloe didn't even look at them. Her eyes were fixed on me. Ethan, why won't you answer me? Is it true? How could you, Ethan? How could you? So that's how a lowly admin like you got a job at Sterling Corp? You used her. Have you been with her all along? Is that why you broke up with me? After all these years, how could you just throw it all away? But her anger quickly dissolved into grief. Her voice choked. After all our years together, how could you just decide you don't want it anymore? More employees were arriving for work now, their eyes wide with curiosity as they stared at the three of us. Julian, who had been quiet for a moment, suddenly started shouting again. Are you all wondering what's going on? We're calling out a homewrecker. Ethan Walker from Design Team A, selling his body at such a young oof. Khloe clapped a hand over his mouth, hissing at him to stop. Don't, Julian. This is between Ethan and me. You'll ruin his reputation. Julian bit down hard on her hand. Blood welled up on her hand, and he shoved her away. You're right. I do want to ruin him. He ruined my dream first. He scrambled into the crowd of onlookers where Khloe couldn't reach him. Ethan Walker from Design Team A is a shameless homewrecker. He was just an admin. He sold his body to get this job, and because I found out, he had his sugar mama fire me. He's the one who should be fired. Everyone, come and see. Come and get this shameless piece of trash. I had never seen a person's face twist with such ugliness. His lies, his twisting of the truth, it was all so shameless. But to my surprise, no one seemed to be buying it. I know Ethan, someone said. The head of marketing was just praising him the other day. Said he's a really talented new hire. Hey, you're talking about our team, another person chimed in. Ethan might be new, but he works harder than anyone. He's the first one here every morning, and he's always willing to help out on projects just for the experience. You've got a lot of nerve. Isn't that Julian from Team B? The guy who's been here less than a month and has already screwed up multiple projects? The real scandal would be if he wasn't fired. Good riddance. Exactly. Who even spreads these kinds of sleazy rumors anymore? Julian clearly hadn't expected this reaction. He tried to argue, but his voice was drowned out by the others. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he pointed toward the end of the hall. Ms. Sterling. The one keeping Ethan is Ms. Sterling. The sound of steady footsteps approached, and Isabella appeared, impeccably dressed in a business suit. She walked calmly to my side. The faint scent of her perfume was calming, and my agitation began to subside. She looked at me, her eyes asking a silent question, and I realized we had reached an understanding. I understood what she was asking, and I nodded. It's true. Ethan and I are together, Isabella said, her voice cool and clear. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that silenced the room. The crowd fell silent for a beat, then erupted into murmurs. Julian's voice was the loudest. See? Do you believe me now? Ethan is a homewrecker, a shameless homewrecker. But soon, other voices drowned him out. What? Ethan and Ms. Sterling. Ms. Sterling isn't married. How can he be a homewrecker? He's her boyfriend. You know, they actually look really good together. I ship it. Did anyone else notice she called him Ethan? She's usually so formal. That sounded almost tender. I'm so jealous of that guy. What did he do in a past life? Save the galaxy. Julian listened in disbelief, his voice cracking as he tried to argue. Even if he's not a homewrecker, he's still a kept man. A boy toy. Why would someone from a family like the Sterlings want a lowly admin who spent 7 years with, Julian cried out, clutching his face. Isabella had taken a folder from her assistant and thrown it squarely in his face. The corner of his mouth split open, and he hissed in pain, silenced. If there is any keeping in my relationship with Ethan, Isabella said, putting an arm around my shoulders, it would be him keeping me. Because Ethan is the chairman of the board of Sterling Corporation. I'm just an employee. She turned to me, her eyes soft. Isn't that right, my fiancé? Just as she finished speaking, a group of people approached from down the hall. It was Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, along with their lawyers. We came to transfer some shares to our son-in-law, Mrs. Sterling announced. But it seems we've walked into quite a show. Her presence was formidable as she surveyed the crowd. The Sterling and Walker families have had a marriage contract for years. The fact that Ethan is willing to marry our Isabella is a blessing for our family. If I hear anyone spreading rumors about him again, they will be fired on the spot. A wave of shock went through the crowd. So Ethan is Ethan Walker? From the Walker real estate dynasty. He was born with a silver spoon, and he still works this hard? I think I have a crush. No wonder Miss Sterling is with him. They're perfect for each other. They're on the same level. Impossible. Julian sputtered, blood dripping from his mouth. I don't believe it. Ethan, you were nothing. How could you be so lucky? Stop it, Khloe said, grabbing his arm. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Mr. Sterling pointed at Julian. Get this man out of my building, he ordered the guards. And make sure he's blacklisted from the entire industry. On what grounds? Julian screamed. I was hired through the official spousal accommodation program. I have a master's degree from a top university. You can't fire me over a personal grudge. I'll go to the press. I'll expose you. Julian knew he had lost. His pathetic little schemes had failed to win Isabella's heart. He would never be the CEO's husband. But his eyes glinted with a new, calculating idea. You want me to go? Fine. But you'll have to pay me a sum that I find satisfactory. Otherwise, I'll go to the media and tell them how Sterling Corp violates labor laws and fires employees without cause. I hear you're in the middle of negotiating a major deal right now. A little negative press at this crucial moment could be very costly, couldn't it? The more he spoke, the more confident he became. As for the amount, I'll discuss it with Miss Sterling privately. Seeing the greedy light in his eyes, I realized he still hadn't given up. He was still delusional enough to think that if he could just get her alone, he could make her fall for him. I looked at him, his mouth bloody, his face a mask of pathetic greed. I remembered the first time I met him, when Khloe had dragged me to the airport to pick him up. He had taken off his sunglasses, looked me up and down, and smirked. So you really did find a guy who looks like me. He had been so arrogant, so smug. Now, his eyes held only a desperate, vulgar madness. The contrast was so stark it was almost sad, and I could only imagine what Khloe was thinking. She was staring at him, her eyes filled with disappointment and confusion, as if she was wondering where the idealized first love she had cherished for so many years had gone. Perhaps, like the version of her that I had loved, he had simply been lost to time. Isabella said nothing, but glanced at the head of HR, who had just arrived. Ms. Sterling, we've completed the background check. Julian's overseas master's degree is fraudulent. He was enrolled, but he was expelled shortly after for disciplinary reasons. The forged degree alone is grounds for immediate termination. The calculating, smug look on Julian's face vanished, replaced by a deathly pallor. A few onlookers, sensing the shift, crowded around to peek at the report in the HR director's hands. Disciplinary reasons? It says here he was being kept by someone, and their spouse came to the campus and caused a huge scandal. The university asked him to leave to avoid further embarrassment. Are you serious? No wonder he was so quick to accuse Ethan of the same thing. He was just projecting his own life story. And look here, he has massive gambling debts. That's why he came back to the States, to run from his creditors. Khloe whipped her head around to stare at him in disbelief. So that money you borrowed from me, the money you said was for a business investment, that was to pay off your gambling debts? You never planned on paying me back, did you? For the first time, she looked at him with utter disgust. Julian, how could you be so cruel? I betrayed Ethan for you, over and over again, and you were just using me the whole time. I didn't use you. Julian sneered, completely unrepentant. You were just stupid. Who's to blame for that? If I hadn't overheard an old classmate talking about your company's spousal accommodation program, do you think I would have wasted a second on you? Besides, if my plan had worked, if I had married into the Sterling family, paying you back would have been nothing. This is your fault. You couldn't even hold on to your own man. He was ready to marry you, and you let him slip through your fingers. If you hadn't screwed up, he wouldn't have been in a position to steal my woman. His words were cruel and sharp. But Khloe didn't argue. She slowly turned to look at me, her eyes filled with a deep, despairing sadness. He's right, she murmured. That money. Ethan and I were saving that for a down payment on a house. She whispered to herself. And I lost Ethan. You lost more than just him, the HR director said coldly. Khloe Miller, during your time as director of Design Team B, you repeatedly covered for Julian, reassigning his incomplete work to other team members and forcing them to work overtime to clean up his messes. Your biased management constitutes a serious dereliction of duty. More importantly, a design Julian submitted 3 days ago was a direct plagiarism of a competitor's work. Not only did you fail to catch it, you fast-tracked it and sent it directly to the client to give him a chance to shine. The client has now discovered the plagiarism and is terminating their contract with us. You have caused significant financial and reputational damage to this company. In light of your previous excellent record at the Columbus branch, we are giving you the opportunity to resign. Khloe listened in silence. I expected her to argue, to beg for another chance. I knew how much her career meant to her, but she just nodded calmly. Okay, I brought this on myself. I will submit my resignation immediately. And so the farce was over. The crowd dispersed, and everyone went back to their desks to start the day. I didn't pay much attention to what happened to Khloe and Julian after that. The company's legal and HR departments would handle it. The revelation of my identity did make things a little awkward with my colleagues at first, but then I remembered how they had defended me that morning, and how well we had worked together. I knew the awkwardness would pass. But as I was leaving work, I saw Julian and Khloe arguing outside the building. Khloe, don't go to Ethan. I forbid it. You used to care about me more than anyone. I'm ready now. We can be together, okay? Khloe shoved him away, her eyes filled with revulsion. I finally understand how Ethan must have felt all this time, she said. To be treated as someone's second choice, it's the most painful thing in the world. Julian, I loved you for many years. But the person I loved was the boy I remember from the schoolyard, the one with clear eyes who smiled at me from across the crowd. You were so proud back then, so disciplined. Even though you didn't want me, I couldn't help but be drawn to you, to want to take care of you. When you came back, I had my doubts. I sensed you weren't the same person, but you gave me hope, and after all those years of obsession, I didn't want to let the chance slip away. I realize now, I wasn't holding on to you. I was holding on to a teenage crush. I haven't loved you for a very long time. Her voice was filled with regret, but Julian couldn't accept it. He had always assumed Khloe would be his safety net, always waiting for him. His dream of marrying into wealth was shattered. Khloe didn't want him, and he was drowning in debt. He snapped. You're leaving me too? I won't let you. If you're leaving, we'll go together. He grabbed Khloe and tried to pull her into the street. Khloe managed to break free. He was the one who ended up in the path of an oncoming car. Julian survived, but he would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. And Khloe, after disappearing for 2 weeks, appeared before me again. Ethan, I know there's no chance for us anymore. I just wanted to say a proper goodbye. Her face was pale and drawn, but she was neatly dressed. She was wearing a white sundress. It was the same one she had worn the day we first met. So much time had passed. She was no longer the girl who had taken my breath away. But seeing the pleading in her eyes, I knew she was right. We had never really said a proper goodbye. The last time I tried to break up with her, she hadn't believed I was serious. Okay, I agreed. 7 years deserved a real ending. We sat across from each other in a small coffee shop. After a long silence, she spoke. I just have one question. If Julian had never come back, would you have married me? I took a sip of my black coffee. It was bitter, but the aftertaste was sweet. Yes, even after he came back, if you had chosen me, definitively, the answer would still have been yes. But there are no what-ifs. My voice was calm. I had truly, finally let go. She seemed surprised by my directness. She froze for a second, and then her eyes filled with tears. She fought them back, her voice trembling as she spoke. The truth is, I had fallen in love with you a long time ago. I just didn't realize it. I regret it so much. I regret losing you. I'm sorry. I won't bother you again. She stood up abruptly, took a few steps, then paused. Ethan, I hope you'll be happy. Then she turned and walked quickly away, her shoulders shaking. I knew she was crying. She was probably filled with genuine regret, but it was too late. This was the price she had to pay for her divided heart. The chapter of my life with Khloe was finally, completely closed. A year later, Isabella and I were married. She insisted on signing a prenuptial agreement. It stipulated that if she ever wronged me, she would walk away with nothing. At our wedding, our friends and family teased us, asking if we were happy. Isabella looked at me and smiled warmly. I married the boy who gave me a piece of candy when I was 5, she said. The boy with the long eyelashes who looked like he'd stepped right out of a comic book. I married the only man I have ever loved. So yes, of course I'm happy. I couldn't hide my astonishment. So when she said she liked men with long eyelashes, she had been talking about me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I think I cared too much. I was afraid you'd reject me, and then we couldn't even be friends. But luckily, it all worked out in the end. Ethan, from now on, all I want is to spend every day, every season, with you. We kissed amidst a wave of applause. It was a long, sweet kiss. I smiled and whispered in her ear, "You're a really good kisser." I like it. She laughed. Is my husband really that easy to please? He really is. But only because he's in love.